Hi, my name is Paige Burns, and I decided to do my report on Stanley Kunitz, and I will specifically be reviewing his poem called Touch Me. To get into the life of Stanley Kunitz, he was born on July 29th, 1905, in Worcester, Massachusetts, and died on May 12th, 2006, in New York City. Kunitz was the youngest of three siblings. His parents' names were Zeta Helen and Solomon Kunitz. Both of them were of Jewish descent. He had two older sisters, and once their father passed away, their mother became the primary caregiver and decided to open a dry goods store. She wound up getting remarried to Mark Dinn, who later had a heart attack and died when Stanley was 14. Stanley moved out of his mother's house when he was only 15 years old and decided to work as a butcher's assistant. To get into the work and experience of Stanley Kunitz, he landed a job as a cub reporter for the Rochester Telegram and worked there during summer vacation while in between attending college at Harvard University. Kunitz was an American poet that was known for his exploration on complex themes in his poetry and the overall influence he had on the world of poetry. Kunitz won a Pulitzer Prize in 1959, which is a prize given out by Columbia University for selected poems. Kunitz also served as a poetry consult for the Library of Congress not once, but twice. He earned his degree from Harvard University with a bachelor's and a master's in English in 1927. While Kunitz worked as an editor, he made many contributions to the poems in magazines, which eventually led him to compile all of those into his first book, Intellectual Things, in 1930. Soon after, he was drafted into the Army during the time of World War II. He served as a conspicuous objector and was discharged as a staff sergeant. He wound up writing a book called Passport to the War, inspired by the times in the military witnessing World War II. After the Army, Kunitz worked as a professor and began doing a visiting lecture at nearby universities. Kunitz moved away from the more formally structured poems and dived into the emotional side of poetry. He was mainly a part of the confessional party movement, exploring the experience humans go through and the complex emotional roller coaster of life. Now to get into the married side. Stanley Kunitz got married to a lady named Eleanor Evans in 1939. They had a daughter named Gretchen a couple decades later in 1950. Unfortunately, Eleanor and Stanley would get a divorce soon after in 1959. Stanley got remarried to a poet named Elise Asher. Elise was known as an American painter and poet. She was mainly known for painting on plexiglass and for illustrating poems written by herself and by others. For his awards and work, Stanley Kunitz got the prize for the Peace Abbey Courage of Conscience in Sherborne, Massachusetts in 1998 for his contribution on how he liberated the spirits of many humans through the poetry that he wrote. One of the last books he wrote before he died was The Wild Braid. A poet reflects on a century in the garden. Overall, Kunitz was a huge inspiration for the world of poetry and really taught the importance on the inner reflection of human emotions. This book reflected on the life of writing poetry and tending to the gardens. This book was filled with his creative processes, personal reflections, and the overall life cycle of humans. It is also filled with many pages of beautiful photos to accompany the poems that were written in the book itself. Now to get to the poem Touch Me by Stanley Kunitz. Summer is late, my heart, words plucked out of the air some 40 years ago, when I was wild with love and almost torn in two. Scatter like leaves this night of whistling wind and rain. It is my heart that's late, it is my song that's flown. Outdoors all afternoon, under a gunmetal sky, staking my garden down, I kneel to the crickets trilling underfoot, as if about to burst from their crusty shells. And like a child again, marveled to hear so clear and brave a music pour from such a small machine. What makes the engine go? Desire, desire, desire. The longing for the dance stirs in the buried life. One season only, and it's done. So let the battered old willow thrash against the window panes. and the house timbers creak. Darling, do you remember the man you married? Touch me, remind me who I am. I selected this poem because I really felt like I saw myself in it. And while the poem does not really follow any type of rhyme sequences, I have noticed some alliteration in it. There is a lot of the same sounds that make the poem almost flow like a song. The repetition of the T sound when he says touch me, and a repetition of the W sound when he says the sentence where the fire was. This makes up for the lack of rhyming in the poem and also allows the poem to sound pleasant to people's ears when it's read aloud. This poem has many different themes that I'd like to discuss. The first would be the passage of time and the love lost. I think Kunitz is definitely calling attention to his first love lost, his wife Eleanor. He directly references it when he says, "Some 40 years ago, when love was wild with love and almost torn in two," talking about the first time they met each other and how they were wild with love, but unfortunately fell out of love and winded up getting a divorce. I think it is prevalent how much this love loss bothered him, and in hope he desperately hopes and wishes that the cruelty of time passing would stop, but unfortunately it did not, and ended up getting to their marriage. In the quote, "I kneeled to the crickets, trilling underfoot, as if about like a child again, marveled to hear so clear." I think this references how he misses being a child again, a much simpler time when his innocence was intact and he could be as free as any child is. The longing to have that youth back and that love back in his life, and reflecting on the time that has passed in between. I would also like to call attention to the line when he says, "What makes the engine go? Desire, desire, desire." Personally, I think this can be kind of reflected on the political state of our world today. I think it ties into really how we're not really running on love and happiness, but are just pure desire. With the state of the world, it's not really much to keep us going. Seeing what's happening in our world is very discouraging and almost depressing at this point. The only thing that keeps us going is pure willpower and desire. We almost have to force ourselves to keep going. At least that's how I see things. Getting towards the end of the poem, we almost see him accept the passage of time that is flown, but also gets a craving to feel at least a piece of the man that he used to be. As he says, to let the old willow thrash on the house, almost saying that, almost saying to let this time pass by and continue on. But then he gets a craving back to get a glimpse of his old life when he says, "Darling, do you remember the man you married? Touch me, remind me who I am." He desperately wants the feeling of who he used to be and what he used to feel. He begs his lover to please touch him and remind him of who he used to be. This poem is filled with so many complex emotions, emotions I honestly quite feel myself. Craving the feeling of when life was simpler and happier, what I would give to just feel that one more time. This is why the poem spoke to me so much, and I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to analyze it and read it. It gave me a much clearer picture of my own thoughts and feelings. And these are the sources that I used. I provided the ones I used for information at the top, and then some pictures that I used throughout the poem, throughout the slide at the bottom. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed.